Everybody, welcome back to the SuperBake podcast. I'm your host, Baker. Let's talk about stuff. Well, I've pretty much given up on my fantasy football season this year. I'm getting my ass kicked. I haven't won a game in like the last 5 weeks or something like that. I actually got off to a pretty good start, but now like Jalen Hurts has got a shoulder injury, so now he's questionable for next week against Houston. Or not Houston, the Cowboys. I think they're playing the Cowboys. So God, that's gonna suck. Probably gonna get my ass kicked. I mean, it's no different than now. Actually, the last few weeks, I've actually been losing by I think just a couple of points or something like that, which is actually kind of frustrating too. But I don't know. I just want to get a win. Oh well, whatever. We'll get through it. We'll see how that goes. All right, so I want to talk about the next two episodes in House of the Dragon, episodes 4 and 5. I'll start with 4 and give my thoughts on that. As always, spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen it yet. So episode's titled King of the Narrow Sea. So in this episode, we saw Daemon return back to King's Landing, back to talk to his brother Viserys. It was that moment was pretty tense, I thought. Those two characters being reunited again. It was cool though. I mean, once again, Matt Smith, I just want to give credit to that guy. He plays a troublemaker really well. In The Crown, he plays, young Philip, and in that show, you kind of see some of his mannerisms in that character as well. It's he definitely plays a shit starter pretty well in this. It just seems like there's always something, just some edge to Daemon, he's always up to something. But I kind of like that about his character. So yeah, we see more of him in this episode, which I thought was great. I think he's definitely one of the highlights of the show. So anytime he's in the episode, I think it definitely is better for it. Also sporting a new haircut in this one, I noticed too. Looks like he doesn't have the white wig anymore. And yeah, he's kind of looking more like his normal self, I guess, in this. So yeah, I almost didn't recognize him for a split second when he walks on the set and he's got shorter hair and he's got the crown on. So, but yeah, he shows up and we see him pledge his allegiance to Viserys, and it seems like they kind of have a little bit of a somewhat touching reunion, almost kind of things seem to be okay-ish for now. Of course, it's a Game of Thrones show, so of course something's gonna fuck it up. It doesn't take long for that to happen either. And that's when we get into a rather weird part of the episode. We see Daemon take Princess Rhaenyra out into the a brothel essentially, and they're in there, and it leads to a very uncomfortable scene between those two. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but if you've seen Game of Thrones, you'll be familiar with what happens. The whole thing was just kind of okay. I get it. With Game of Thrones, we saw Cersei and Jaime, and they were brother and sister, and then Jon and Dany hook up, and they're aunt and uncle. Of course, Daemon and Rhaenyra are uncle and niece. So when those two kind of get together briefly in the brothel, even though they only kiss, it's still I kept watching. I kept just thinking ugh, this is gross. I don't know. I didn't like that at all. I mean, it's Game of Thrones. It's and I'm glad I didn't go any further than that. But man, I just kept thinking okay, this is getting really uncomfortable. I don't like this. Yeah, that was weird. But yeah, fortunately, that was a pretty brief moment in the episode. Yeah, and then we see Rhaenyra actually hook up with Kristen, the knight that's guarding her. I think that's his name. So yeah, I was yeah, way to go, dude. It seemed like those two kind of had a connection, so I was kind of waiting for those two to finally hook up. I was when the fuck are these two getting together? It's I know it's coming. It's gonna happen. These two are happening. So finally got to see some of that, and it was definitely nice seeing Rhaenyra hook up with a guy she's not related to. I think that was definitely much more preferable than her and Daemon for sure. Especially just the fact that Daemon's just such a creepy fucking dude. Ignoring the fact that he's her uncle, he's a creepy fucking dude anyway. I don't know. He's one of those guys you love to hate because he's just such a fucking shit stain of a human being. And then I love the scene where he's just completely hammered the next morning, and his mistress walks in, or wife walks in, and tries to offer him the drink to kind of help him with his hangover, and he just dumps it. He's just such a douchebag. He doesn't even want to accept help from people. I don't know. It just cracks me up. I love how he gets dragged in by the guards into the into the castle, into the in front of the Iron Throne, where Viserys kind of has this little confrontation with him. It is like how they're dragging him in, and he's just like drunkenly like I don't know, just leave me alone, let go of me. It's just like as they're just dragging him in there, like he's getting manhandled, and he's just like these barking orders at these guys. It's like, dude, it's like you're gonna get your ass kicked if you don't watch it. I was really surprised. I thought that in that confrontation, like when Viserys finds out like what happened between Daemon and Rhaenyra, Rhaenyra. It's been a long fucking day. But I really thought he was going to kill Daemon in that scene. I was very surprised that didn't happen. I guess I kind of knew that it wasn't going to happen, like that he wasn't going to kill him off, because it seems like Daemon's a pretty big character in the show. So I guess I kind of figured he wasn't going to die, but I don't know. If that was my daughter, I would probably want to stab his ass. So I don't know. But yeah, I love how Viserys just leaves Daemon just lying there after he banishes him, and I don't know, this cracks me up. Like the whole episode, Daemon was kind of cracking me up, especially in the parts where he was still kind of hungover. We got to see, more of Otto's character in this one too, and seeing like the like his plans, because it definitely seems like it's implied that he's definitely plotting something, like him trying to pimp out Alicent to Viserys, and then trying to get an heir out of that, and then he's the one that basically goes to the king because it's one of his spies that catches Rhaenyra with Daemon, even though the spy doesn't catch Rhaenyra with the guard, with Kristen. So that was good, because I like Kristen's character. I didn't want to see him get hurt. But yeah, that was... got to see that. I kind of got vibes of... what was his name? The bald guy from Game of Thrones. Why is his name Varys, Lord Varys? Kind of made me think of that. Like Otto kind of gives me Lord Varys vibes a little bit. Like he's got all these spies in the city and he uses them to kind of keep tabs on people. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It kind of makes me wonder if we're going to see more of those, more of those people that are kind of under his employ. He definitely seems like a character who's like really slimy and greasy, and like he's got his hands in all kinds of pots in King's Landing. He definitely seems like he is. Like, there's a lot more to him than meets the eye. I definitely get the feeling that, like, he's got some other schemes going on behind the scenes. So I'll be curious to see, like, where that goes. But yeah, it was very fortunate that his spies didn't catch Rhaenyra with Kristen, so that was definitely good. But yeah, like, in the scene with when Viserys basically demotes Otto and he's no longer Hand of the King, that was a big shocker for sure. I definitely didn't think that was going to happen, and the episode leaves off from there between those two. So I'm curious to see how that's going to play out, like in the next episode, and especially later in the season. Because it seems like in this, like Viserys has that disease, like where it looks like parts of his body are starting to rot away. Like he's already lost his ring and pinky finger from his left hand, and there's a scene where they show him, and it's like when he's with Alicent and Bid, and he's got like just splotches on his body and stuff. So it seems like whatever he's got is like spreading. I can't remember. I feel like they said what it was in episode 2 or 3, but I can't remember what they called it. But yeah, it seems like it's spreading all over his body. So I'm wondering if maybe like if his time is limited. So like if he's only got so much time left in the show, I'll be curious to see how that plays out. But yeah, like this was there was a lot of things in this episode I liked. I liked that we got that touching little scene with Rhaenyra and Alicent again. In the last episode, it seemed like Rhaenyra was kind of giving her the cold shoulder because of her hooking up with her dad. So it was kind of nice to see those two kind of get back to their old friendship again, even though it's obviously never going to be the same because Alicent is the queen. So yeah, it was nice to see those two at least talking again. And you get to see them kind of, give a little bit of how they're really feeling about their situation. Like Alicent kind of tells Rhaenyra how she feels about being the queen, and you get the impression that she really doesn't want it. It seems like there's a bit of envy between those two for one another, but that was a nice little touching moment. I liked that part. And of course, another highlight for me, seeing Otto getting put in his place too. Excuse me. That was definitely a good scene for sure. But yeah, overall, episode 4 definitely a really good solid episode. Again, same with the Game of Thrones stuff that you would expect, the scheming and backstabbing, as well as a little bit of incest that you got from the original Game of Thrones series. Unfortunately, that's in this one as well. But I guess Wouldn't be Game of Thrones if it didn't have a little bit of that stuff in it too. And of course, also wouldn't be Game of Thrones if you didn't see people just banging each other in a brothel. So yeah, I think we've all kind of come to expect that from the series. But yeah, overall, solid episode. Has me excited for episode 5, which I will be talking about here shortly. And now I'll talk briefly about episode 5 of House of the Dragon. And this one opens up with Daemon Targaryen pretty much up to his old tricks. We see him in the Vale. Looks like he's at the Castle Runestone, and we see him go after, I think the character's name is Lady Rhea Royce. We see her on horseback. Looks like she's riding around doing some hunting, and then she's taken out by Daemon. It's pretty much revealed that he doesn't really have any love for her. That scene was pretty brutal to watch, too. I mean, I've said this before, Daemon's character, like, he's just, you can't help but love to hate the dude. He's so deliciously evil. I kind of felt sorry for this character, too. Lady Royce, like, I don't remember if we've seen her before in the show. I don't think we have, at least not very much. Like, she's only in this episode for, like, a couple short minutes, but, like, she definitely leaves an impression, like, a lasting impression in this scene, for sure. And her death is pretty brutal, even though we don't actually see it. Like, we see her get knocked off her horse, which that was brutal to watch too. Like, she ends up paralyzed because of the fall, and then she, I mean, admittedly, it probably wasn't a smart move on her part, but she starts chastising Daemon, and then he starts to walk away, but then she insults him again, and then he grabs a rock and comes back to finish her off, which that was I don't know if this was supposed to be a callback to Game of Thrones. I remember in Game of Thrones, the episode where the Hound fights against Brienne, and he's lying on the ground helpless, we see, it kind of reminds me of that scene. And there's another scene earlier in the show with him and Arya where he's sleeping and she debates grabbing a rock to bash his head in. Probably just a coincidence, but I couldn't help but be reminded of those two scenes for some reason. I don't know if that was just me. But yeah, I think this gives us a interesting, dark opening to the show, and once again cements Daemon as being a pretty ruthless, fucked up dude. But after that, we cut to King Viserys and Rhianna riding to meet Lord Corlys at his home, basically to kind of discuss peace with them and try to basically calm down the two houses. Where it turns out Rhianna is going to be offered to Lord Corlys's son Laenor, I think is how you say his name, and so there's a big celebration there. And this is where pretty much most of the episode takes place. It's just kind of in the halls of I think it's called Driftwood or Driftmark or whatever it's called, of House Velaryon. Yeah, Driftmark. I've kind of got notes here with me, so I'm kind of reading through those as I'm talking about this. But yeah, that's interesting too. We get to see more of King Viserys and his diminishing health. Like, it looks like his leprosy is continuing to get worse. All the scenes with him and where we see like how far along his disease is going is definitely pretty hard to watch sometimes. Like in this episode, we see like there's a part where they're using the leech therapy on his arm because more of his flesh is starting to rot away. And yeah, that's pretty. I mean, I'm glad they don't spend too much time or detail on that, just because I have a weak stomach for that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean they do a good job of showing his diminishing health. It kind of seems like his relationship with Alicent is kind of like the one good thing he has left in his life. And speaking of Alicent, her character, kind of want to talk about that a little bit more. It seems like in this episode, we definitely see some more of a darker side to her character. It seems like she's kind of plotting some stuff behind the scenes too, kind of like her father, Otto. There's a kind of a heartbreaking scene between her and Otto, who in this episode we learn, well, in the last episode, his title of Hand of the King was taken away. And so Otto is basically just an ordinary man now, and he's about to leave the Red Keep. And we get to see this kind of a heartbreaking moment between him and his daughter, where he finds out that, she didn't back him. She backed Rhianna after confronting her about the accusations made against her and, having sex with Daemon Targaryen. And we see like Otto kind of chastises Alicent, saying that she made the wrong decision. And that, eventually when Rhianna becomes queen, like nobody will support her, and she'll eventually try to kill Alicent's children since they'll be the rightful heirs to the Iron Throne. I think this is probably setting up for some future conflicts. I feel like there's a little bit of that in this episode, where it's kind of setting up for what's going to come later in the season. I know that I think after this episode, there's supposed to be a time skip, I think, from episode 6 onward. So I'm assuming this is kind of setting the pieces in place for future confrontations between Rhianna and Alicent. So I think they do a good job here. And we do kind of learn that really Rihanna, or we already knew this from the last episode, but Rihanna did technically lie to Alicent. I mean, kinda. I don't remember if she said that she didn't sleep with anyone, but I know she said she didn't sleep with Daemon, but she slept with Sir Criston. But I don't think Alicent knew about that. So I'll be interested to know like how that's going to play out down the road. One thing I also wanted to note in this too is there's a really kind of a heartbreaking scene between Sir Criston and Rhaenyra, where they're on the ship and we see his character. He tries to convince her to come with him to his home, so he can give up being a knight, and they don't have to run around hiding their relationship with each other, and they can be married and actually be in love. And she, yeah, kind of coldly turns him down. I'm going to be honest, I kind of felt sorry for Kristen in that episode, or that scene. I got to say, Rhaenyra, I like her character. I think she's well acted by Millie Alcock, I think is the actress's name, but like, man, she's pretty cold in this episode for sure. Like, I'm definitely getting the impression that she is not the best person. Like you kind of want to root for her because I think you kind of want to imagine her as being sort of like Dany from the beginning of Game of Thrones, just because of the similarities between them, like their appearance. But like, man, she's kind of cold-hearted in this episode. Like, it's very obvious that like she's not interested in a life of being poor and a commoner. She wants to retain her status as being queen and a Targaryen and hang on to that power. So it's kind of sad to see her turn down Kristen like that, and clearly like break his heart in that scene. I genuinely felt sorry for him in this episode, and there's also another big part for him later on in the episode too. This is, in many ways, this is kind of Kristen's episode. There's a scene later on in the episode where we see when they're having the celebration for Rhaenyra marrying Laenor. There's a scene where Laenor, the guy that he's sleeping with, I think his name is Sir Joffrey, the Knight of Kisses, I think is his name. He kind of figures out that, like, we see that there's kind of this interesting little confrontation where he figures out that that Sir Criston is sleeping with Rhaenyra, and so he kind of confronts him about it, and we kind of get this tense little exchange between those two, where he's kind of like Sir Joffrey's kind of telling him, we need to look out for each other because we're kind of doing the same thing. Basically, we're both fucking, the two royals. So, and that leads to a pretty brutal scene later in the episode, which I'm not going to go into that too much just because I don't want to spoil it. But yeah, Sir Criston, he definitely has a bigger part in this episode for sure. Like, he had several big moments in this episode, and I felt sorry for him. And we also get, interesting little conversation between him and Alicent later in the episode where he actually reveals that everything Rhaenyra told her was a lie. So, like, that he's the one that slept with Rhaenyra in the previous episode, because I don't think Alicent knew about that, because Rhaenyra didn't tell her. So that kind of had me going like, oh shit, like, man, I feel like we're going to see a more devious side of Alicent in future episodes to come. So I'm definitely interested to see where that goes. But yeah, this episode overall was definitely, like I said, it feels like it's setting up pieces for what's to come later in the season. Still a good episode, and I don't mind episodes like this where it kind of slows down a little bit and allows world building, like more world building to occur. So I'm fine with that. I think this was definitely a pretty good episode overall. Daemon, it seems like he had a couple scenes in this, but overall I felt like his role in it felt a little bit diminished. This felt more like a focus on like Rhaenyra, Lord Corlys and his family, and then of course Sir Criston and also Alicent as well. So yeah, it seems like there's definitely a lot of Game of Thrones-ish deception going on in this episode. So curious to see, how this is all going to play out, how the pieces that this episode is setting, how those are going to come together in later episodes. But yeah, overall, still really enjoying this show. I think this episode was definitely good. Not one of my personal favorites so far out of the 5 that I've seen, but I still liked it quite a bit. I think this show is definitely it's keeping me invested for sure. Like, I'm halfway through because there's 10 episodes. So yeah, I think I'm curious to see how they're going to handle the time skip coming up. Like, I don't mind time skips in shows depending on how they're handled. Like, I'm watching The Crown right now, and I'm just about through season 2. And I know in season 3 onward, there's a time skip where there's a older actress. I think it's Olivia Colman who plays Queen Elizabeth instead of Claire Foy. So It's just so funny bouncing between those two shows, The Crown and House of the Dragon. It's a very interesting mix of shows that I'm watching right now. But yeah, I'll continue watching it. I don't think I'm going to be able to get all of season one of House of the Dragon, like my thoughts on them, up before the end of the year. I'll definitely try to, but there's a good chance I may only be able to get up episodes 6 and 7 before the end of the year. So if I'm not able to get them up in this year, then I'll definitely for sure get those episodes posted online, probably first thing in January. So look for those and more content to come. So now I'd like to give my review for the movie Barbarian, which came out earlier this year. Looks like the release date for the movie was September 9th, September 9th of this year. So saw that a little bit earlier this month when I got a deal on HBO Max, so I started watching this movie. I was curious to see this film for a while. I had heard quite a few things about it. It had gotten a lot of buzz. One of the things I had heard in one of the reviews was that you should go into this movie knowing as little as possible. So I will admit, full disclosure, I did know most of the plot of the film going into it. So looking back, I do think that may have taken a little bit from my experience of the film, but overall, I still really enjoyed this movie. So I just want to take some time just to talk about it. This is not going to be quite as in-depth a review like I normally do. Normally, I have like some points written down. This one I don't. This is mostly just off the cuff, just because I just really haven't had time to do it yet. But I just want to get my thoughts on this movie. So this will be, I'll try to make this as in-depth as I can, but considering I didn't really write my thoughts down, forgive me if this is a little bit shitty. So let's get right into it. So the film is directed by Zach Krieger. I guess this is his first solo directorial debut for a film. I think he co-directed another movie a few years ago. Let me see, what was it? I think it was called, Miss March. I never saw that movie. I'm not even familiar with it. He's done other stuff. Like I think he was in the show called The Whitest Kids You Know. I really didn't know anything about this guy going into this. But yeah, for the first time, for his first solo act at directing a film, I would say this is definitely a solid start for sure. The film stars, Georgina Campbell, Bill Skarsgård, and Justin Long. So I'm just going to give just a brief synopsis of the story and try to keep this as spoiler-free as I can as far as the synopsis goes. I will get into spoilers, and I'll let you know when I do. But yeah, just the synopsis. Georgina Campbell plays a young woman named Tess. She essentially she comes to Detroit for a job interview, and she is staying at a house that she booked on Airbnb. When she gets there, it turns out that there's somebody else staying in the house, which leads to a really weird, awkward situation. But then she discovers slowly that there is a much darker secret within the house that potentially is going to put her life in a lot of danger. So that, in a nutshell, is the synopsis for the story. And from here on out, I am going to get into some pretty heavy spoilers just because it's kind of hard to talk about this film without getting into, some of the major spoilers of the plot. So if you haven't seen this movie and you don't want to know what happens, then I'm going to put a timestamp in the description for this video. So just skip to that timestamp and then you can, avoid any spoilers for this. But consider this your warning. It's nothing but spoiler territory from here on out. So I'm just going to give just briefly my thoughts on this film before I kind of go into like the meat and potatoes of it. I really liked this movie. I can definitely understand the praise it's gotten. I think it is a very well-made movie, especially again for being Zach Krieger's first foray into making a solo horror film. I think that's definitely impressive for sure what he's done here. I will say though, I do feel like having watched this movie 3 times now, it does feel like it's one of those films where you really kind of have to not think about it too much. I found myself, like, the more I watched it, the more I found myself thinking about some of the logistics of the movie, like the smaller details, and the more I found it seemed to kind of make less sense. And I'll kind of get into my reasons for thinking that here in a little while. But overall, yes, I really enjoyed this film. I think if you are a horror movie fan, I think you'll definitely enjoy this film. I would definitely recommend it in that regard. But I'll get into coming to the details of this film. First of all, like some of the things that I really liked about this movie, it was nice seeing Bill Skarsgård in this film and not as Pennywise. Um, he definitely, I think, fit the role he was given very well. The character Keith. So when the character Tess shows up, Georgina Campbell, when she shows up to the house, there's this big mix-up where she sees that Bill Skarsgård's character is already staying there because he booked it through another company, and there was some confusion, and so they both accidentally booked the same house. And so like it leads to this really awkward kind of situation between the two of them where, Tess is trying to figure out like what should she do? Should she try to find a hotel somewhere? And then she discovers there's no hotels available because there's this big conference going on there in Detroit. So she can't find anywhere else to go. And so Bill's character basically offers her to stay in the house with him, and he'll sleep on the couch and she can sleep in the bedroom. And there's like this really awkward like back and forth between them where, he's trying to convince her to stay, but he's trying to be like really nice about it. And it's like, it feels very real. The first, I would say 30 minutes or so of the movie, 30, 45 minutes feel pretty realistic to me. Like the way these two characters respond to the situation feels like how I think two people would actually respond in real life. Like you have Bill's character who is like, he's trying to be nice. He's trying not to freak out, Tess, he's not trying to make her uncomfortable because he knows that because she's alone, he knows that she's probably very nervous around him because she doesn't know him. But it's like he kind of comes off as awkward and a little creepy, I think inadvertently. And I don't know, I think it works to his character. I like Bill Skarsgård too. I think he's just a good actor. And it's nice to see him playing just like a regular dude in this movie. And I think he does it very well. And then, the character Tess, played by Georgina Campbell, again, like I like how she responds to Bill Skarsgård's character. Like she's asking him for his information. Like it's not like how most scary films would do this situation, like where she just kind of, I feel like in most films, like they would just kind of accept the situation and just like, just kind of not think about it. But she actually like, she asks him for his registration information for the house to make sure that he really did book it legitimately. When she finds his driver's license at one point, so she tries to like look him up to see if she can find, I assume, like any warrants or anything or any bad information on him. So again, I feel like this is realistic. Like she's asking questions. She's not just accepting the situation. She's trying to make sure that, everything is legit. And I think that that's a good realistic approach that I feel like a lot of scary films wouldn't take. So I'm going to kind of get into, I guess, the big twist of the movie. So I mentioned before that the movie has like a darker secret, or the house has a darker secret to it, that the two characters find out about later. So eventually it's discovered that there is an underground, essentially a subterranean tunnel system under the house that Tess's character discovers one day while Bill Skarsgård's character is away. And so she goes down there, she explores it a little bit. It's like it's a hidden door in the wall. And like she pulls a rope and the door opens up and she finds this hallway that seems to go really far back and it's like super dark. Another thing I did like about this is another kind of point of realism is like at first when she sees it, she's like, fuck no. Like I think any rational person would do. Like no, I'm not going down that tunnel. That's fuck. It might as well have a neon sign that says death written over it. But she gets locked in the basement. She can't get out because it's revealed that the door to the basement, the lock doesn't work very well, and when it shuts, it locks by accident. So eventually she does cave in. She does go explore it because of course she does. And then she discovers like at the far back of the tunnel, there's like this room with like blood and like a bed and a camera, and it's just like this really sketchy, really creepy room where something clearly terrible has been going on. And it's like, you don't know what, but you know it's not good. And like, there's blood there and it's just like, it's really super creepy. And then of course, naturally her character gets freaked out. And then she, like Bill Skarsgård's character comes back and then they discover that there is another, even deeper tunnel system that goes below that one. So it goes down even further. And then they discover that living in there is, basically like a mutant woman, who I think they call her like the mother creature in the movie or something like that. And then that creature shows up essentially and essentially comes after Tess's character. And that reveal was definitely big. Like when that first happened, her like the reveal of that character when she shows up was legitimately good jump scare. And the whole tension when they discover that underground tunnel system and they're exploring it is genuinely creepy. But this is the part of the movie where I think they start to go into like the stereotypical scary movie part. Because like Bill Skarsgård's character, like when Tess explains to him like what she saw down there, he decides to go investigate, which again is something that I think it's like a cliche of every scary film. Like there's always that character that has to go look instead of just like taking a quick cursory glance and then just calling the cops. He has to go down and actually explore it, which of course leads to him, getting killed by the mutant creature. It's like a Hills Have Eyes type situation almost. That's kind of what the mother creature in this movie makes me think of. Yeah, and that's like about 45 minutes, roughly halfway through the movie when they discover all that's going on. And it's like, and when Bill Skarsgård's character gets killed, it is such a jarring moment. The way she just like crushes his head against the wall is just like, it's so just, it hits you really fast. And then the movie does something that really was surprising to me. Like it cuts away. So like you see Bill Skarsgård's character get killed, and then the creature is like just towering over Tess, and you're just kind of watching like, oh shit, what's going to happen? And then it cuts away. And then it almost feels like it goes into a completely different movie. And that's when we're introduced to the character AJ, played by Justin Long, who I love Justin Long. He's such a great actor. He's so dorky, but he plays it so well. And he plays this part particularly well, I think. So one thing about this movie that I think one of the major themes of this movie that at least the way I interpret it is it explores the theme of not judging people or objects by their outward appearances. There's a lot of that in this film. So like when you watch that, you'll kind of see what I mean. But what I mean by that is like there's a few examples of it. So like, for example, when she first arrives to the house, it's like in the middle of the night and there's a really bad storm coming down. And like she can't see anything. She can't, like it's raining so hard, she can't really see the other houses. Like the street that she's on, it's not particularly well lit, but it looks like pretty much any normal neighborhood street. You wouldn't really think anything of it. But the only house that really looks okay is the house that she's staying in. All the other houses you can't really see very well at night, but again, there's nothing about them that really stands out as being unusual or even ominous. So you don't really think anything of it. And then the next morning, like when she's able to actually see in the daylight what the houses look like, all the other houses are like they're dilapidated, they're run down, some of them are even like collapsing. So you realize like, oh, okay, like this is a really bad part of town. And like even when she goes to her interview, like the person she interviews with, when she tells her like where she's staying, her manager's like she looks like really concerned, and she says like, no, you shouldn't be staying there. That's a dangerous part of town. And even Bill Skarsgård's character tells her like, yeah, like they're not in a good place. It's dangerous. And that kind of plays into the theme of like, not judging things by their appearance, because even though the house that they're staying in is by far the nicest house on the street and looks like it would be the safest, it's actually the most dangerous because of what it hides. It's kind of like that theme of like, somebody's outward appearance doesn't necessarily show you like who they are inside. There could be something truly dark inside of them. And then Justin Long's character is another good example of that the film plays with. So his character, he's a film actor he's supposed to be working on some show, and he basically loses the part of the show because he is basically accused of, forcing himself on one of his co-stars. And so they basically accuse him of rape, essentially. And so he's no longer going to be in the show. And this part of the film is really interesting because it's like, we see it from his perspective. So at this point, it's just an accusation. So we as the audience, we don't really know for sure if it's true. We just are experiencing it from his perspective as he's given the bad news. And then, of course, later on it's revealed, he actually tells one of his buddies, like when he gets into a bar, he tells him like he actually did do what he was accused of. So that's when we realize, oh, okay, yeah, the Justin Long's character, he's a piece of shit. Like he absolutely did do all the shit that he's been accused of. So, but yeah, like, so And this part of the movie, when they introduced Justin Long's character, was like, it was really jarring, because it feels almost like a completely different movie. And I kind of found myself thinking, like, wait, how is he connected? Like, what does he have to do with the house and what's going on there? And then it turns out, like, he owns the house itself, and he's just like, he rents it out to people, essentially. And then, so basically his character, because he's going through this whole legal battle with the accusation, he has to go sell some properties that he owns, and that house happens to be one of them. And this actually leads to a fairly comical moment in the movie where we see Justin Long's character come back. He's staying in the house by himself. He's really confused because he can see that, like, Tess and Bill Skarsgård's stuff are still in the house. So he's like, what the fuck? I love the scene when he calls the company that he rents the house out to, and he basically just, like, bitches them out about, like, people staying there. Like, he's such a fucking jackass in this movie. It cracks me up. And then I love I love when he discovers the underground tunnel system. It's such a complete flip from how Tess and Bill Skarsgård react when they find it. Like, they're terrified when they see it, but he is, like, super curious, and he even tries to, like, look up online, like, if he can, like, increase the value of his home because of it. Like, if he can, like, count that as, like, part of the square footage of the house or some shit. It's like, what a fucking jackass. Even when he finds the creepy room with, like, the bed and stuff, he's, like, not even freaked out by it. He's like, he's just measuring it with, like, a measuring tape and stuff. That part actually legitimately made me laugh. Like, I think Justin Long really plays that part really well. But yeah, like, kind of back to what I was saying before about, like, I'm not going to give a play-by-play of everything that happens, because I kind of want to leave the rest of it for, like, you to watch for yourself and decide what you think about it. But I kind of wanted to give just sort of, like, the gist of, like, what happens, like, what the basic overall story is. But, like, yeah, like, kind of going back to what I said before about the theme of not judging something by its cover, like, when you see Justin Long's character, you know, eventually he meets up with Tess, and it's like she's trusting him, even though we as the audience know, like, this guy's a piece of shit and she shouldn't trust him. But again, he looks like a regular guy. He looks like somebody who would be trustworthy. So it kind of goes back to the theme of, like, not judging something by its outward appearance. The house looks like a safe, you know, well-established place, but it turns out it's home to an underground tunnel system with, like, a mutant creature that wants to kill people. And then, you know, AJ's character, like, he looks like a relatively trustworthy, decent guy, but he's actually a piece of shit human being, who just screws people over just right and left in this movie. Like, he is such a fucking just dick in this movie. I will say a couple things about the movie that I didn't care for, or at least, I guess, I don't know if I want to go so far as to say I didn't like them, but I guess I have questions. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying before about the film, how I feel like while I really enjoyed it and I think it's a well-made scary film, it does seem like there are some things, particularly with the details, where the more you think about them, the more the movie seems to kind of, I don't want to say fall apart, but I just feel like it makes less sense. So, like, it's discovered, like, when they discover the mutant woman, they discover, like, who she is and how she got down there, which it turns out she's, like, the end result of, like, just years of, like, just this guy essentially kidnapping women and then raping them and then having sex with their offspring, essentially. It's, like, super creepy and fucked up. And the character I recognize the actor. I couldn't remember his name. Let me look him up real quick. The actor that plays the guy who was doing that. Let me see real quick. I just had it. Let's see. Richard Brake. Okay, yeah. Richard Brake, that's the actor. Yeah, he plays the character named Frank, who is the guy who originally owned the house before AJ, like back in, like, the 70s or 80s. That's another weird part of the movie. Is it has, like, a flashback into the 70s and 80s where it shows, like, Frank's character and stuff, and you see him in that house, and it shows him, like, you kind of get a glimpse of, like, what he does and kind of his plot as far as, like, you know, how he kidnaps women and takes them down there, and that whole thing's really creepy too. But, like, yeah, so it's like that he is the one who essentially has created the like the mutant mother woman creature. Again, she's kind of the end result of just years of, like, incest and inbreeding, essentially. So like, yeah, there's a whole thing about with that and his character as well, which again, I don't want to go into that too much. I kind of want to leave that to you to find out for yourself if you decide to watch this movie. But like I said, so like, I guess one of my questions with this movie is, so like, I guess he's the one who constructed the underground tunnel system, but like there's electricity down there because you see like there's TVs running. There's clearly like there's lights set up because there's rooms lit down there. So it's like he set up like electricity. I think he's an electrician. It shows him wearing like an electrician's outfit, but I don't know if that was him just using it as a way to sneak in to trick people so he could sneak into their houses, or if he actually was an electrician. I'm not really sure. I guess if he was, it would make sense. But I kept thinking about that. Like, how did he set all this up? Like, how did he? I feel like something like that would take a long ass time to make, and I don't know how you would do it by yourself. Like, so much could go wrong. Like if you're building the tunnel and you do something wrong, it could collapse on you. And then setting up the electricity down there, I feel like wouldn't the city notice that? Wouldn't the city notice like electricity is being siphoned off down there or something like that? And if you set up a generator, I mean, you'd have to replace it, wouldn't you? I don't know. It's like I said, there's several moments like that in the movie that kind of make you think about that. At least they made me think about that. And then also too, another question I had was like, okay, so it's a huge tunnel system under this house, and somehow Justin Long's character you never noticed this? Like when he bought the property? I mean, okay, they imply that he's very absent-minded. He doesn't really pay attention to stuff. So yes, I guess it's feasible that he could have bought the house and didn't give a shit about it, and never even checked it out possibly. But I don't know, I just kind of find that hard to believe that like, nobody would have done an inspection. Nobody would have seen anything. I even think like the company that does that rents the house out to people, they even said that there's like a cleaning service, like these maids that come in there and clean it out. It's like, wouldn't they go into the basement? I don't know. Excuse me. God, I can't stop burping. Excuse me. Yeah, that's staying in. So yeah, there's little things like that too in the movie as well. Like there's another part in the movie like where, so like it's established that like people around the house know about the woman that lives in there. Like there's a scene where she gets helped by this homeless man. Who, again, another great part of the movie where they show, where it kind of goes with the theme of not judging a book by its cover. Like when she first encounters the homeless man, he's yelling at her to get out of the house, and she thinks that he's trying to hurt her, but it turns out he knows about what's in there. He knows about the mutant, and he doesn't want her to go in there because he thinks she's going to get hurt. And he tells her the whole story about it later on. But it's like, okay, so if he knew about it, why didn't he go to the police? There is a scene in the movie which, I don't know, I kind of found it a little bit annoying. It's where Tess is talking to two police officers. She manages to escape, and she's like covered in blood and stuff, and she's trying to explain to them like what happened in the house. Like she tells them about, Bill's character getting killed and getting his head smashed in, and the cops are kind of dicks to her, and like they don't even, like they refuse to help her even though like she tells them she witnessed a murder. Like I've never worked in law enforcement, so I could be completely out of my depth here, and in fact I probably am, but like I feel like in real life, if you tell a police officer that like you just witnessed a murder, I feel like they would have a obligation to go at least investigate, and they barely do anything. I mean, okay, I get it from their perspective. Like, she's trying to break into a locked house because she doesn't have the key on her, so she can't get in. And so from their perspective, they don't know who she is. She does kind of look like she's like a homeless person, so they probably think that she's just a crazy person. But I don't know, just that whole scene, it just kind of felt like they didn't really want to do much. It felt like they did the bare minimum. I don't know. I feel like in real life they would do a little bit more. And it kind of contradicts the beginning of the film where it felt like it was going relatively in a realistic direction. But yeah, like there's little things like that, just little tiny details in the movie that I found myself, the more I thought about it, the more it didn't ruin the movie for me, but it just kind of made me, it was kind of hard to ignore them, I guess. It kind of felt like they added up. But that's like the negatives. As far as the positives go, the movie is very well acted. Like Georgina Campbell as Tess, like she is fantastic. I didn't even know who she was before this movie. I know she's done a few other things. I can't remember what other movies she's been in, but yeah, like I know she's done a few other productions, but like she's phenomenal in this movie. Like I think her acting is really good. Bill Skarsgård again plays the awkward Keith character really well. He's actually very likable and charming in this movie. Actually, when him and Tess kind of meet, it actually does kind of seem like there's a bit of a budding romance between them, and you kind of buy into it a little bit. So yeah, like I liked Bill in this movie. I hate that he got killed off, but I really like him in this movie. I hope he's in more films. I think he definitely is he's a great actor for sure. Plus, he just seems like a generally cool guy. Justin Long, love the guy. Love him in everything he's in. It's nice to see him play just such a fucking complete piece of shit douchebag in this film. Especially, I still think of him from like the movie Jeepers Creepers. Like I know that was kind of his first big acting role in films, and I know he's done so much since then, like Dodgeball, and of course he's his name Kevin on F is for Family. So it's nice to see him doing other stuff too. But yeah, he just plays such a fucking piece of shit in this movie, and it's just you can't help but love him. I mean, you love to hate him in this film. What can I say? And yeah, like all the other actors and actresses in this film, I think do a great job. It's mostly just those three that the movie focuses on for the most part. It's pretty creepy, honestly, that when they discover the tunnel system, especially like when Tess is first exploring it, and then we're kind of experiencing it with her as she's going deeper and deeper into the dark tunnels, is like, it's genuinely creepy and unnerving. Like, again, if you don't know what's coming, if you don't know what to expect, it is genuinely nerve-wracking. And there's definitely a good feeling of claustrophobia the movie captures, because the tunnels they're in, like, they're very narrow, and there's just barely enough room for one person to walk through them. So, and like they switch a lot between, like, the camera shots switch a lot between like the characters walking in third person to like these really close quarters, like first person perspectives through the tunnels, which I think really it really helps put you in the shoes of the characters as they're going through it. And I even found myself getting pretty uncomfortable in some of the scenes where they're walking through the tunnels. Like I found myself kind of looking around thinking like, okay, where's the mutant bitch? When's she going to show up? I know she's coming. Yeah, it's a good movie. I really enjoyed it. It's like I said, I think it's one of those films where you kind of have to not think about it too much. I feel like the more you think about it, the more I think you're going to find yourself kind of noticing things about it that don't work. At least I felt like I did. But overall, like it's effective. It's a really interesting movie. And again, for being the guy's first time directing a movie on his own, especially a scary film, I think he did a really good job. And honestly, I would be excited to see what more stuff Zach Krieger does down the road. Hopefully he continues down this route of making scary films, because I think he's got something there. So yeah, I think this movie has a recommendation from me. It's nothing incredible. It's nothing that's going to, at least in my opinion, that's going to blow you away. But I mean, if you feel like there's been kind of a dry spell of decent horror flicks, then I suggest checking this one out. I think it's worth your time. So, all right, guys. Well, I think that's all I had for today on this podcast. A little bit longer than what I normally do. Once again, I'm on Anchor, Spotify, and YouTube. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and I will catch you guys next time. Later.